In this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step one of my favourite betting strategies that I use various times each and every year. The betting strategy is easy to do and it's almost guaranteed to win your money every single time that you use it. So this betting strategy works best with two different bookmakers, Bet365 and Sky Bet. And if you spot the perfect horse race to implement this strategy on, you can really see your profits absolutely skyrocket and explode, guaranteed, regardless of whichever horse goes on to win the race. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be revealing the betting strategy in a step-by-step format, as I've kind of just touched on in the introduction. And in this video, with this betting strategy, what we're looking to do is always pick winners when we're placing bets. Like you can see on screen, I've done exactly that. Now, of course, for that reason, this is a very, very good betting strategy and it's very advantageous when we use it. But with that being said, you can't just implement the strategy on every single race that you see fit. So you can't just go through the day with Bet365 or with Sky Bet, using the strategy over and over again. You have to use some sort of selection process because it'll only work, this particular betting strategy, on specific races. But we're going to dive into which races to target and how to find them and things like that within this presentation. So before we jump in, there's just one more thing I kind of want to touch on before we move on to the next slide. And that's the fact that we're not clairvoyants, we're not able to predict the future, and neither is anybody else. Contrary to some of the stuff that you might have seen on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, with betting tipsters sort of almost giving you a clairvoyant look into the future, at least from their perspective, telling you which horses they think is going to win the race. That's not reality, and because of that we actually have to implement a bit of basic maths and a bit of basic common sense. But it is pretty basic, like I sort of touched on, but it is important to know that we're not just predicting the future and just sitting on our phone and saying that horse is definitely going to win. Let's put every drop of cash that we've got in our account on it. So because of that, and because we're not able to predict the future, just the same as everybody else in the world isn't able to predict the future, what we've got to do in order to guarantee a winner like this every single time we use this strategy is actually bet on every single horse within the race. Now this is really, really simple, and you can use this to make a lot of money when you implement it on the right races, which we're going to touch on within this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the next slide, and what I've actually done here is I've created my own fictional bookmakers, Liam's Bookmakers, and I've actually got a market on screen which I've just manually made up myself. And you can see with this market we've got horses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 along the left hand column, and I've actually priced it up as well. So you've got the decimal prices for horse 1, which is 2, decimal price for horse 2, which is 4.0, horse 3, which is 6, and that goes on down to the last horse in the race, which has decimal odds of 26. Now if you use fractions and you're more used to the conventional fractions, I've actually put the fractional conversion in on there as well. So you can see horse 1, 1 to 1, horse 2, 3 to 1, horse 3, 5 to 1, that goes on to the last horse in the race, which is 25 to 1. Now that's typically what you would find with a conventional bookmaker, whether using Bet365, Sky or any other soft bookmaker that is out there. They'll usually give you the option of using the decimal odds format or the conventional fractional odds format, and they'll have a list of horses within the race. They'll offer you prices, and then you choose whether you want to bet on them or whether you don't. Now, one thing that bookmakers don't sort of touch on, and this is why I'm kind of showing you all this before we lead into the strategy, one thing that they don't touch on is this right-hand column, or they generally don't touch on this at least, which is implied probability or percentage chance. So if you didn't know, betting odds are a reflection of probability. So for example, horse 1 is priced at even money, 1 to 1. So that means there's a 50% chance that the outcome will occur, i.e. the horse will win the race, and a 50% chance it won't win the race and it'll finish second, third, fourth, fifth or sixth, but ultimately it won't win the race. So there we have the percentage on the right hand column as 50% because it's an even money shot. The clue's in the name, it's a 50% chance. Whereas horse 2 is priced at 3 to 1 in fractions, 4.0 in decimals. So obviously that would mean that the horse should win 1 in every 4 times, and that is represented by the 25% chance in the implied probability column on the right hand side. And of course that goes on down the list. You can see horse 3, 16.67, horse 4, 16.67. Horse 5 has a 10% chance of winning because its price is 9 to 1. And horse 6, price of 25 to 1, 26 in decimals, has about 3.85% chance of picking up the victory in this made up race that I've got here with Liam's Bookmakers. So you might be asking yourself, why are you sort of telling me all this? This just looks Very normal to what you would find on Bet365 and Sky. You get the option of fractions, you get the option of decimals. Granted, you don't get the implied probability view, but this all looks pretty normal. And I promise this does tie into how the strategy is going to work and how we're going to be able to bet on every horse to make a guaranteed profit. But I kind of want to show you this implied probability section on the right hand side. We touched on what it is. It's the percentage chance, so the odds converted to percentage chance that the runner will pick up the victory within the race. So if you add all these percentage chances together, so you tally up horse 1's percentage chance, horse 2's percentage chance, and all the way down to horse 6's implied probability or percentage chance, you can see I've got the grand total down here at the bottom, which is 122.2% chance, or round about that number. So basically what I'm saying, what Liam's Bookmakers is saying right here, is that in this race with 6 horses, I as the bookmaker am telling you as the punter, in this example, that there's a 122.2% chance that one of these 6 horses will pick up the victory in this race. Now anybody with half a brain knows that that isn't true. There's a 100% chance that one of these horses is going on to win the race. There's not a 122.2% chance that's going to happen. So what you're looking at, this extra 22.2% chance on top of the 100%, is the bookmakers' theoretical value margin. It's the mispricing they've got in their odds. They've worked out the true odds and they're swaying all the odds in their favour to give themselves that 22.2% value margin over the punter. So this could be factored in on all the different runners. There might be a mispricing on the favourite, a small mispricing there. There might be a larger mispricing on horse 6. Horse 3 will be mispriced. And all these odds are mispriced against the punter. So the bookmaker is working at the true price and offering the punter a shorter price. And that all factors in to the eventual book value or the over-round. And you can see in this case it's 122.2%. on the book value. So this is a big way that bookmakers, soft bookmakers, make money. They misprice their odds, and over the long term, if you keep betting into these negative overrounds like this, you obviously will lose money. Now I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Everybody knows that bookmakers work out the true price and offer a price shorter than the true price. That's how they make money. It's no different to if you were to walk into Sainsbury's and they were offering you 20p for a pint of milk. The milk was fine, it wasn't out of date, but they're offering you a really good valued price. It's not going to happen, right? Sainsbury's buys the milk for a certain price and then they charge you more when you go into the shop and you want to buy it. That's what the bookmakers are doing. They're offering out you a price, it's shorter than the true price, and they're seeing who's going to take it. It's no different in that regard. But anyway, back to what we're touching on. If you were to bet on every horse within this race, you would not make any money. You would actually lose money because the odds are stacked in favour of the bookmaker, and you can see they've got a 22.2% margin over the house. So the more that number down at the bottom, all the odds added together, is over 100%, the more the bookmaker's value margin is. Whereas if that number was beneath 100%, the punter would have the margin and would be able to back every runner in the race to guarantee a profit. And I'll just show you a screenshot of that. I took a little snapshot from an Excel sheet I made. You can see in the left-hand column we've got horses 1 through 6 going along the left-hand column. The price or the back odds of each of the runners represented in decimal format. So you've got 2, 4, 6, 6, 10, 26. The percentage chance of those decimal odds converted into percentage chance that the runner's going to pick up the victory. And you can see that's going down there. All tallied together like we touched on, 122.2% chance. And what we're saying, I've got this down at the bottom here, is we're going to use a £600 total stake to bet on every horse within this race. So we're going to average £100 across each runner. Now we're not going to use exactly a £100 stake on each runner because we're targeting the same win return should our horse pick up the victory. So you can see we'd have to stake more on runner 1. We'd have to stake £245 on runner 1 because its price was evens, its price was 2.0. Whereas runner 6, we'd actually only have to stake about £19 or just short of £19 because its price is 26. And that is so a return, regardless of which horse wins, will be the same. That's highlighted in this red section here. So you can see whichever horse wins the race, our return on that runner will be about £491.10. Now you don't have to be a genius to work out if we're using a total stake of £600, so all the stakes going down this column, total up to £600, and then once the race concludes we're guaranteed to get back £491.10. you know, you don't have to be a genius to work out that's a bad investment, and you can see we'd lose just shy of 19% of our overall stake doing that. And that's simply because the bookmakers' odds are swaying in their favour. They've got a 22.2% theoretical value margin, so they've mispriced the market enough, so they've got the edge in that regard. And you can see, because of that, it's not profitable to back every horse to win the race and make a guaranteed profit once it's all said and done. So you might be sort of getting a little bit confused, because I've sort of told you throughout this video up until this point, that's what we're going to do. In the first slide I explained we're going to bet on every horse to win the race, so we can guarantee we pick the winner and walk away with more money than we put in when it's all said and done. But I've just shown you this slide, and you can see that's not possible. And this is how bookmakers always price their market up, by the way, as well. There will always be a value margin, and the over-round is always going to be, or the book value is always going to be over 100% at all times. So the question is, how do we do it then? And the answer to that question is we have to look into the place market. Now, if you're just becoming smart to the industry and learning how the industry works, you might think that the place market and the each-way market is renowned for being an area where mug money goes to die, and it's an area where the bookmaker sucks in a lot of leisure money and recreational money. A lot of that is true, but you'd be actually surprised that there's a load of value within the place markets and the each-way markets with bookmakers if you know what you're looking at. So, next slide, same principle again as the previous slide. I've got horses 1 through 6 along the left-hand column, but this time I've actually got the place prices, so the chance or the odds that the runner is going to land in a place. So you can see horse 1, decimal price is 1.2, fractional odds are 1 to 5, horse 2 1.6, 3 to 5 in fractions, and then obviously down at the bottom, horse 6 6.0, 5 to 1 in fractions. And this basically, like I said, is the place prices, so the odds for the runners to land in a place position. Now, what places I as the bookmaker am paying out on, we'll touch on that in a minute, it's not really important for this slide, but I wanted to show you that this is the place prices based on those win prices that we've seen in that earlier slide. Now, if you want to work out the way that bookmakers work out the place prices, they're not modelling it and figuring out the exact chance. Generally what they're doing, well, always what they're doing, the formula is to take the fractional price of the winner's run price. So the favourite, if you remember, was evens in that earlier slide. They'll take the fractional odds, 1 to 1, divided by the fractional payout for the runner if it places. So it's always a fifth these days. So 1 to 1 divided by a fifth. And then once they've done that, they add 1 to the total. And that presents you with your decimal price for the runner to land in a place. Sounds a bit confusing, sounds a little bit of a weird way of working it out. That's how soft bookmakers do work that formula out. They're not working out the exact chance, they're just slapping on a arbitrary formula to the win price that they've got and sort of saying that'll be enough and we'll make the money over the long term just by applying this sort of generic arbitrary formula. And that's one of the reasons why there is an edge with this strategy. We'll dive into how the strategy works in a little while, probably after this slide or maybe in 2 slides time. But before we get there, you can see I've got the same thing again with the implied probability or percentage chance along the right hand column. With a traditional bookmaker, you won't be able to see this. They'd have this hidden away in the background, or the whole charade would quickly come falling down if people could see the way that bookmakers were stacking the chance of their odds against the punter. But you can see all I've done again, same thing again. I've added all these probabilities together in the right hand column, and then you can see the total down at the bottom this time is about 298.2%. So now you're probably thinking that number is significantly over that 100% fur area, which I discussed earlier. It's way over that, way over, and well, considerably further over than the win book percentage, which was like 22.2% chance over. So that must mean that is terrible, terrible value. But because in a place market there is more than one winner, it isn't as bad as it first seems. And in this next slide, I'm going to show you exactly why there could potentially be a large chunk of value from the each-way market. So we'll move into the next slide here. I've got the same principle as the previous slide going on here. Horses 1 through 6 along the left-hand column. The place price of each of the runners this time represented in decimal odds format, and again the percentage chance, or the decimal odds converted into percentage chance that the runner's picking up the place position All that added together on the book value side, 298.2%. We touched on all that. And we're going to use the same principle again. £600 total stake. We're looking to Dutch this, so bet on every horse across the place market. And we're looking to gain the same return regardless of which horse wins the race. So that means we're going to use more of our stake on the short price runners. So you'd use £167 stake at odds of 1.2 on the shortest price runner, whereas you'd only need to use about £33.50 on the largest price runner in the aim of getting the return exactly the same if the runner lands in a place. And you can see the return, regardless of whichever runner places, would be about £201.20. Now, just very quickly, I do want to say that bookmakers don't just offer this market. I'm sure most people will know that. You can't just go onto the bookmaker and say, I want to bet each way only and I want to disregard the win portion of the bet. With the bookmaker, you're going to have to use the win, bet on the horse to win. Select a little checkbox on the bet slip or whatever it is, which will double down your stake, and then you'll bet each way. So you'd be betting on the win portion and then you'd be betting on the place each way portion as well. But for this example that I'm showing you here, we're going to disregard the win portion. I'm just specifically looking at if we could just bet in the each way market with a bookmaker. But you'll see, this all makes sense in a minute. So along the right hand section of this spreadsheet, screenshot I've got here, I've got numbers 1 through 6 along the left hand axis here, and that basically represents the amount of places the bookmaker is paying out on. So if the bookmaker was paying out on one place, you could see you get a £201.20 return, or there or thereabouts, regardless of whichever horse landed in the place. And obviously, as we've bet £600 initially across the entire Dutch, bet on every horse to place in the each way market, we'd obviously lose £400. I hope that makes sense. If you put in £600 in and you're guaranteed to get £201.20 back, regardless of which horse places, you're going to lose the difference, which is obviously £400. But if there were two places paid out by the bookmaker, you can see we'd get £402.37 back, because you would get 2 place returns across 2 runners. It doesn't matter which ones that it is. Our returns are exactly the same regardless of whichever horse places. But because we've used £600 as our total Dutch stake, we've only got £402 back. You can see we'd still be at a loss of about £198. Not ideal. But can you see what happens when it gets to 3 places paid out by the bookmaker? £603.60 return, but because we've only put £599.98 or £600 in, we'd actually yield a profit of £3.60 and a 0.6% return on investment. And then if we move down to 4 places paid by the bookmaker, we'd get an £804.80 return because we've only put £600 in. The difference between the two and the profit for us would be £204.80. So I hope that makes sense to you. The more places that are being paid, the better it is for us. And once it hits a certain amount of places that the bookmaker is paying, we'll actually get more back in profits than what we put in from initial stake. Now obviously, 2 things before we move on to the next slide. First thing we touched on earlier, bookmakers don't allow you to just bet in the each way market. You've got to bet on the win portion of the bet as well. You've got to bet win, and then the second part of your bet is going to be on each way. This example only covers the each way portion, which isn't allowed with traditional UK bookmakers, obviously. But we'll get into how we can turn that to our advantage in a minute. And number 2, no bookmaker in their right mind would offer 4 places in a 6-horse race like I've got with this example. That's just not going to happen. So because this is just an example, I wanted to make it as simple and as basic as possible. But in reality, there'll be more runners in the race, and obviously they'll still be paying more places than what they do on standard, but it won't be as basic and as black and white as I've made this example. So we move on to the next slide. The strategy works like this. Like I said, with a bookmaker, you've got to bet win in each way. You can't get around that. You can't just bet in the each way market. You either bet in the win market only across every runner, which we've touched on is not profitable. You'll always lose money using that approach. Or you bet in the win market and the each way market simultaneously, so at the same time. So you can see if we bet both win and each way across both sides of the market, if we used a total £600 on the win side, we'd obviously lose our £108.93. Our return guaranteed would be about £491.10. So obviously the difference between your stake and your return is a minus £108.93 deficit, so you'd lose money there. We touched on that. But if the bookmaker was paying it on 4 places, I'm not saying they would do in a 6-horse race, this is for this example, I'll show you some proper examples in a minute, you can see we'd gain about £805 back almost, and from our initial £600 stake on the place side, that would be a £204.80 profit on that side. So the profit from this strategy is basically the loss you take from dutching and betting on every horse to win in the win market, minus £108.93, plus the profit you make from the return from the place market. So you can see we'd have £204.80 minus £108.93 in this example. And the difference between the two, this bottom number right here, is your profit from using this strategy, which would be £95.87 in this example. And basically, in a nutshell, to surmise what we've been over up until this point, we're looking to bet winning each way across every single runner. We expect to lose money by betting on every horse to win only, because the overround's in favour of the bookmaker. But if our race selection is on point and we're choosing profitable races, we expect to win more money than we put in on the place side, because the bookmaker has gone overboard on their places. And the profit we get from the each way side of the bet, the doubling down our stake on the each way side, will override the loss we take on the win side, and the difference between that number in between is the profit that we'll walk away with. So obviously the question then becomes, where does this strategy work, and where is this strategy applicable, and where should I implement this strategy? Because like I touched on, it does not work on every single race. Bookmakers are aware of savvy punters what are using these kind of things and these kind of edges to make profits. Ideally, they don't want to be giving away value like this, but they get greedy sometimes, and when they get greedy, which is typically where the edge comes from, you actually take advantage of that and lock in the profit by implementing this strategy. So basically, in a nutshell, if I were to surmise where the best races are for this race, the strategy works best on large field races with a significant number of places that are being paid by the bookmaker on top of what the standard number of places would typically be. So here's a perfect example of that, and this is what I'm going to be talking about within the remainder of this video. Sky Bet at Cheltenham here, they were paying 7 places instead of 4 places. That's highlighted right there where I'm moving my mouse. So if the standard amount of places they're paying out is 4, but the bookmaker has ramped that up to 7 total places, so you're getting 3 extra places, this is a potential race where this strategy could work wonders. So that's the main characteristic that you'll be looking for if you want to use this each way dutching strategy. You want to be looking for races where the bookmaker has gone overboard on the total number of places that they're paying. So in other words, they're offering a large amount of extra places. In this case, it's paying 7 places total instead of the traditional 4 places. That's one side of things. The other side is that the win odds have to be enticing enough for this to work. So if the overround on the win side is like 160% or something like that, that will probably be too much for this place side portion of the bet to override. So to surmise, in black and white, you're looking for the bookmaker to be offering half decent odds with a large number of places in total being offered, which is significantly larger than the standard number in that kind of race. So what you're looking for is the bookmaker to be trying to outcompete the competition, if you know what I mean. So Sky Bet will be trying to outcompete Bet365 and all the other bookmakers out there. The way they'll do it is try and offer really enticing prices as close to the true price as they can, and a load of places total. And that's basically what you're looking for. That's the perfect setup. So places like the Cheltenham Festival, Royal Ascot, Grand National Festival, the Guineas, York Ebor Festival, places like that, all the big events throughout the year where there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it. The bookmaker's going to be competing with all the other bookmakers for attention, so they're offering decent prices and a large number of places. That's what you're looking for. But with that being said, opportunities like this can just pop up on a Saturday afternoon at a random point throughout the year, so you've got to be on the lookout for this kind of thing. But by and large, big festivals are where the biggest opportunities pop up with this strategy, and where I've had my largest profits from implementing it as well. So like I touched on, I've used this strategy loads of times. The biggest result and the best profit I have ever had, as far as I can remember, was this one right here. You can see I actually earned £1,063 of profit by using the strategy that we've talked about in this video on this race at Cheltenham about 2 years ago, I think it was now. And you can see my minimum profit would have actually been a £180 profit or thereabouts. My maximum profit would have been as large as £2,230, and I actually locked in a profit at the end of £1,063, which was actually a 35.5% return on my overall stake, which is unbelievably high. You know, a 35.5% edge on a betting strategy or on anything in life is just mind-blowingly high. So like I said, this is an outlier example. I think this is the largest profit that I've ever had using this each way Dutching strategy, as far as I can remember anyway. I've had profits at around this £1,000 mark before, but I'm pretty sure they was all below this. Usually it'll be about a 200, a 300, maybe a £400 profit using the stakes that I use when implementing this each way Dutching strategy. But this example is an outlier, and this is a significantly huge return on investment. So next up, if you're interested in match betting and you're interested in beating the bookmakers, I would definitely recommend checking out this match betting provider. It's called OddsMonkey. I've actually been with them since 2019 and they've helped me make a lot of money, thousands and thousands of pounds of profit off the bookmakers, guaranteed, without taking on any real risk. Now, the strategy I've talked about within this video is the most advanced match betting strategy that's out there. It is a little bit complex for most people, I can appreciate that, but these guys have some really basic, easy strategies that you can use to beat the bookmakers. So if you've got a free bet and you want to turn that into guaranteed cash regardless of what happens, you can do that. There's a football betting strategy called the Two Up offer. They've got software and tools which will help you do that. An odds matcher, so you can compare all the prices across all the different bookmakers and spot opportunities where value prices pop up, and you can erb between the back price with the bookmaker and lay off with the lay price on the exchange. And there's a load of stuff underneath this OddsMonkey match betting umbrella. Now, if you know me and you follow my channel, you'll know I'm a big proponent of using OddsMonkey and doing match betting. It's an easy way of making money online, completely risk-free. So if you are interested in this kind of thing and beating bookmakers and you like the sort of things I've been touching on, start off here at OddsMonkey if you're interested. I'll leave a free trial link down below in the description so you can sign up for free, see if you like it. They'll show you some of the basic elements around how match betting works, and they'll allow you to make about £100, I think it is, of guaranteed profit for free without putting any card details in, and then you can choose whether you want to carry it on after you learn how it all works. Like I said, I legitimately have made a lot of money over the years from match betting, and I do really recommend it. So the free trial link, if you are interested, is down below in the description box of this video. So moving on, what we would do once we've found a race which fits this criteria, loads of places on top of standard, decent win prices, we can pop it into a spreadsheet like I've done here. It's a little bit low in quality, I had to screenshot this from my laptop. Pop it all into a spreadsheet with the win prices. Spreadsheet or the calculator or whatever you want to use will work out all the place prices, and it'll show you your lowest potential profit, which in this race at Cheltenham was a loss of £5, and your highest potential profit, which could have been up to £119. Now, OddsMonkey, like I just touched on in the previous slide, have a spreadsheet exactly like this which you can use. It's called the Susie Beth Each Way Dutching sheet, and it was the spreadsheet where I made that £1,000 profit earlier on. So they've got one. I've actually got one as well, which calculates these stakes a little bit differently, but they're both really good resources. So do check out OddsMonkey if you want to use theirs. And I've got this one, which is the one that I've developed, and that's available on my Patreon page for people who've been following me for a long time. So basically all you would have to do at this point is pop all the win prices in with the bookmaker that you're using. That'll tell you the exact each way stake that you should use on each of the runners in the race, and that will give you this overall position here. So you're risking £5.39 in this example, and your highest potential profit would be £119. And this risk of £5.39 is unlikely to occur. So just to show you, what I did here is I bet £22 each way at odds of 9.5 in decimals on Magical Zoo, £26 9p each way at odds of 7.5 on Favewar, £28.57 at odds of 6.5 on So Scottish each way. And that I've done that basically just because this spreadsheet that I've developed here is telling me to use these exact stakes on the specific runner based on their prices. And once I did that, I just come over to this covered section on the left hand side of the spreadsheet, selected yes, moved on to the next one, winning each way for King of Kingsfields, use the stake the spreadsheet recommended me, place the bet each way, move on and go through the list one by one by one. And you can see once I'd covered every single horse by selecting yes along the left hand axis of the spreadsheet, I'd selected number of places 7 because that's obviously very important to the strategy, as we touched on all throughout this video up until this point. This was my overall position. Worst case, I'd lose a fiver. Best case, I'd win £119. And the Dutch was done. It took about 30 minutes. I could then sit back, chill, relax, let the race pan out, and then see who ended up picking up the victory. So for this example and for this race, I was actually doing it pretty close to post time, probably started about 50 minutes before the scheduled post time of the race and started working my way through it. Bookmakers know that people will be trying to do this hours out, so sometimes they'll have their odds not quite as enticing enough 3 or 4 hours out. This is a new trait that they've started using over recent years. And once we get to the last sort of hour, they really make their prices competitive to try and compete with Bet365 and Coral and Ladbrokes and all those guys. And that's quite often where the edge pops up these days in the last hour or so, maybe 2 hours, where the odds are getting really enticing. The prices are high enough. And I implemented this strategy. But with that being said, I have done this hours out in the past and it's worked out. So it's kind of a balancing act. You've got to keep your eyes on races like this, where there's a large number of places that are being paid, and at some point it might not be profitable, and as you get close to the race, the bookmaker might improve the over-round on the win side, and that will then become profitable for the race, if that makes sense. So once the race was concluded, this was the end result. You can see I made £65.20 once the race was all said and done. This was the outcome of the race. So Absurd won, then Luda Sword, Pied Piper was 3rd, Magical Zo was 4th, and the list goes on. And that was actually an 11% return on my investment. So basically, I actually used a £584.21 total stake, and my return was £649.41. The difference between the stake I used and the return I got back was £65.20, and you can see that was a huge 11% return on investment. Now with this strategy, I'd actually be comfortable using a larger stake than that, because obviously the larger the stake you use, the more profit you will make. But with this account that I was using, which I'm showing you this example in this video, it was actually lightly stake restricted already. So this was basically the maximum I could get on using this account with the bookmaker. You know, if you know anything about betting, you know that bookmakers do unfortunately ban successful people. Usually when they're using this strategy, it's by limiting the amount of stakes that they can use. So when you start off, you'll be allowed to use infinite stake for all intents and purposes. But once you become intelligent and you start making money with what you're doing, they might limit you to like £30 each way. Then it might go to £13 each way, then it might go to 30p each way. And that's just a downside of the betting industry. So you do generally have to have quite a few accounts to be able to do this and be able to make money from bookmakers. They're not in the business of taking on smart money. So you do have to account for things like that, as people who regularly watch my channel will already know all about the downsides of soft bookmakers all across the world and stuff like that. But you can see, to surmise this slide here, once it was all said and done, we made £65.20 because the return we got back was larger than the stake we used, and that was an 11% return on investment. And of course, that led us to selecting which runner was going to win the race. We knew this was going to happen regardless. It could have been the favourite, it could have been the last favourite, it could have been a midfield runner, somewhere in between. We were guaranteed to choose the winner because we backed every horse to win the race, and as well as that, landing in each way position. And obviously we got more back in our returns from doing that than we put in our initial stake. And like I just touched on, you can use larger stakes doing this. You're not limited to just using a £500 total accumulative each way stake across win and each way. You could go as high as 3,000 or just shy of 3,000 like I did here. And you can even go higher than that using my spreadsheet. And you can see if you would have gone for a £3,000 total stake, or just shy of 3,000, you can see 2,900, you would still return 11% or 11.15%, but the result, because you're using larger numbers, would be £326 of profit. So you'd put 2,920 in, and you get 3,247 back because you're using larger numbers. And I actually did this across other accounts throughout this Cheltenham Festival. I don't really want to show them on here because they're not yet stake restricted, and I've got all the free bets still available with them. And like I've just touched on, bookmakers do ban people who use edges and use maths to their advantage when they're betting. So with this account and this example that I showed you on, this account was already stake restricted, and now I'm guessing if I looked at it now, it'll be stake restricted to pennies. But you can use larger amounts of money, is what I'm trying to say. And the larger amounts that you use, if the edge is there, like it was with this race and like it is with other races throughout the year, you can make some nice profits back. You can see 11% of 2,920 is 326, and that would have been the profit using that larger stake. So yeah, I hope that makes sense to you. It is one of the more confusing match betting strategies because you've got to bet on 2 books and things like that. But there's actually a much easier match betting strategy where you can earn lots and lots of money, just like this strategy, all throughout the football season. It's to do with football, like I touched on. It's called the Tour Offer, and you should check out this video, which I've just linked on screen now, and that will show you exactly how you can do that. That strategy is super easy, and you can use it all throughout the football season. So yeah, cheers guys, and I'll see you in the next video.